Before we begin, I would like to ask everyone to turn off any wireless communication devices to avoid any technical interference with the microphones and taping of the meeting. A call-in line has been established for the community to hear the meeting interpreted live in Spanish. The number to call is 508-924-5155. Board Member LaSalle Frazier, please make this announcement in Spanish.
Buenas tardes. Se ha establecido una línea telefónica para que la comunidad pueda llamar y tenga acceso a interpretación en español en vivo. El número a llamar es el 508-924-5155. Repito, el número a llamar es el 508-924-5155.
Thank you, Ms. Frazier. For those who are not able to observe now, this meeting is being recorded and can be accessed for later viewing on the Prince George's County Public Schools YouTube channel. Lastly, I would also like to remind all board members to turn on their microphones when speaking for recording purposes. Board Member LaSalle Frazier, will you please lead us in board prayer and pledge of allegiance?
Let us pray. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance. Steer us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. Amen. Let us stand.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Ellis, please call the roll.
Good evening, everyone. Mrs. Adam Stafford. Ms. Boozer Strother.
Present.
Mr. Briggs. Mr. Fields. Dr. Harris. Mr. Jackson. Mrs. LaSalle Frazier.
Present.
Dr. J. Miller. Dr. Z. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Murray.
Present.
Mrs. Rout. Ms. Walker.
Present.
Ms. Rivera Forbes. Mrs. Mickens Murray.
Present. We have a quorum. Is there a motion to adopt the October 12th, 2023 board work session agenda?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Ms.
Aye.
Please raise your hand so that I can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8. Thank you. The chair recognizes Superintendent House to present items 2.1 and 2.2, MCAP results and mathematics.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, board members. I hope each of you are well. Before we get started, I wanted to publicly acknowledge the news that many of us have heard in reference to what's going on in the Middle East and how it is truly affecting some of our community and some of our families. All children, regardless of where they come from, what they look like, their background, deserve a childhood free of violence. And PGCPS is committed to providing that safe environment that we expect, that nourishing environment that we want for each of our scholars. Any parent who is concerned about how their child is reacting to the current events should let their school administration know so that we can provide the necessary support. With that being said, the subject this evening, as you indicated, Madam Chair, in this work session is in reference to the latest MCAP results. Dr. Strader, right behind me, will go into further detail about how each of our students has performed in different subcategories. So more than half of the 50 Maryland schools showing the greatest improvement in ELA are in Prince George's County, and that's something to, quite frankly, be proud of. I had a chance to share that information secondhand with Dr. Judy White's group, and it was a time to celebrate, but we also indicated that we want to focus on what's next and really push the needle even further. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Strader to the microphone. Dr. Strader?
So good evening. Mic check. Thank you for your time. All right, so let's get started. So if we can bring the presentation up on the screen, please. All right, so thank you very much. So members of the board, I am also joined here with the Director of Testing, Research, and Evaluation, Ms. Jamie Bauer. She'll be supporting me with part of this presentation, but let's go ahead and get started. Slide 3. So here are our objectives within this presentation. We have 10 outlined here. We'll be covering these in great detail. This presentation contains a lot of data, a lot of slides, and we'll be focusing on the key highlights as we move forward. So first, getting a better understanding of the test this year. The Spring 22-23 administration of MCAP is the first administration that's going to be used. Well, these were the first two administrations post-COVID that'll be used for the trend setting for the Maryland Accountability Program. The Spring 22 administration will establish the baselines for the star rating systems. So this will be the second year of that administration, of the MCAP administration, that'll be used for accountability purposes. The focus here is still on college and career readiness, or on track for college and career readiness. The scale score is 750, is used to define proficiency, as well as, again, that college and career ready score. There's been 2 articles that have been published recently. One's internal, and the other has been out there, which Mr. House mentioned, Superintendent House mentioned, and that is Maryland's 50 most improved schools. There's a couple quotes in there that are very worthy of our attention. Again, more than half of those schools, 26 of those schools identified there are PGCPS schools. To summarize, we have increase of pretty much all of our demographics and student groups in ELA between 22 and 23, as well as in mathematics. So again, good news as far as our gains from year to year. We're going to highlight some key areas in ELA and areas for celebration, as well as some areas of which we need to focus for improvement. Next slide, please. So when we look at some of the highlights that we're going to share here, first of which, in ELA, English Language Arts, we have finally met that pre-pandemic performance level. So we are back to actually, we have outgained where we were prior to the pandemic. When looking at the proficiency rates across nearly all tests, grade levels, in both ELA and mathematics, we have experienced gains since last year, which is good news. And now I would like to talk in terms of our schools. For English Language Arts, 129 of our 140 elementary schools experienced a gain in at least one grade level. 42 of our 44 middle schools, as well as charters and academies, experienced a gain. 15 of our 27 high schools in English 10 experienced a gain. This is great news. So overwhelming majority of our schools, again, have experienced gains in ELA. Even so in mathematics, when you look at our elementary schools, again, out of 140 of our elementary schools, 136 of those elementary schools experienced a gain in at least one grade level. 37 of our middle charter academies, 37 of the 44 experienced a gain in at least one grade level. And 17 of our 27 high schools experienced a gain in English, in Algebra 1. So again, when we're looking across the schools, the message here is growth. The district is definitely on the right track. A couple other pieces to share. In this presentation, not only will we look at the typical information you see regarding our performance in English Language Arts, mathematics, and the student groups and the racial groups that you're accustomed to seeing, we'll also be sharing information regarding our exited EL students and students with disabilities. We always want to question, how are our EL or ESOL programs performing, as well as our students with disabilities programs performing? So we will be sharing, you will see later in the slides, that our exited EL students as well as exited students with disabilities are actually performing as well or outperforming their general education counterparts. So we'll be touching upon this piece of information as well. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Ms. Jamie Bowers. She'll walk us through some of the state shared data.
Good evening, board members. How are you? I am a proud director this evening to share our MCAP data for our district. As Dr. Schrader has alluded, we did experience tremendous growth across more than 75 to 80% of our schools last year. So it's definitely something to celebrate. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes looking at our state shared information from MSDE during their board presentation. So these look similar from what we shared last spring, that the State Department does like to rank order its districts in looking at performance in grades 3 to 8, and then English 10 and Algebra 1. So I'll start by looking at the English Language Arts grades 3 to 8. We were 37 proficiency rate across the state. And we, again, like last year, we are kind of gaining in that proficiency rate and closely nearing our peers that are in those darker blues. In our English 10, we definitely saw a tremendous improvement of our students performing at that high school assessment. And we are nearly at half of our students in English 10 performing proficiency. One of the things we'll talk about later when we talk about students who are on the cusp of proficiency, and the state is seeing this trend as well, is our students in the light blue bars at the bottom. Those are our students who are below proficiency. Those are our below learners. So the state, as well as Prince George's County, is actually seeing a shift in more students moving from that below performance to developing learner. And that is definitely a trend or a pattern that we want to see. And I'll speak to you at the end of the presentation what our version of this looks like, but we are also seeing a similar pattern. You're also seeing in that kind of not quite darker blue, but almost, those are our proficient learners. So you see across 3 to 8 in English 10 that more students are moving more into the proficient, as well as that top tier, which is our distinguished learners. So as a state and as a district, we are moving students from being that below learner group up into the developing, proficient, and distinguished. So that is definitely a pattern that we want to see. When you look at our percentage of growth, as Dr. Schrader alluded to, we are in the middle of the pack, and we are seeing about 3 percentage points of growth over our entire 3 through 8 population in reading, which is definitely something to celebrate. We definitely also, when we looked at this by school, looking at grades 3 to 5, 6 to 8, like he said, we are seeing a majority of our schools, at least in one grade level, showing growth. And I do also want to celebrate, there were many, many schools that saw increases in all 3 grade levels within their school. So that's something we want to share with principals and really kind of talk to schools about celebrating, their achievements and how they're reaching those gains, because they're definitely something to emulate and talk to. So as far as math, while we're not quite where we want to be, I can say that we did experience growth across our district. So we are at 12% proficient across our grades 3 to 8. And in Algebra 1, we did increase by 2 percentage points. We are now at about 7 percentage points. It's not quite where we were pre-pandemic, but we are moving closer to that target. So just like you saw in reading, the state and Prince George's County as well is shortening the number of students who are in that beginning learner category, which is definitely what we want to see. Not as many students across the state and in the district up in that top tier of our students who are distinguished learners, but definitely many more students who are growing into that developing and proficient learner. So not as positive a pattern as we want to see, not certainly what we saw in language arts, but we're moving in that direction. So as far as looking at growth percentage, as a total district, we made about 2 percentage points of growth, and when you average our 3 to 8 scores. But the thing I want to point out about math is when I was looking at how our schools performed, we actually had more elementary schools show growth across those elementary schools than we saw middle schools, which is actually a positive sign because we want to get our early learners back to engaging in tactile math, differentiated instruction. And so that shows me that that's a little sign of hope that we had so many elementary schools gaining from one year to the next in students who are proficient. So these are our district overall results. So we're looking at school years 19, 22, and 23. So you can see in that light blue to the medium blue to the dark blue, you can see a very positive trend in our English language arts. You're seeing that we have now exceeded pre-pandemic performance across our grade levels, with the exception of grade 5, and I'll talk about that in a second. But we are definitely trending in a very, very positive direction, exceeding where our students were 4 school years ago before the pandemic. So that means that the instruction, the interventions, the supports we are putting in place in our district are having a positive impact. We did see one grade level, and I don't consider this statistically significant, but it was 0.2 of a percentage point of loss. However, when I actually looked at school by school, I noticed that we still had 65 of 140 of our elementary schools make growth. So that tells me that more than half of our elementary schools are still making growth. But what that tells me is that our 5th graders, probably when you look at the data, how it shaked out, the 5th grade data, some schools did not make enough growth to show that we made a positive gain in that grade level. So just something for us to keep in mind and look at grade 5 and reading. For mathematics, we have not returned to pre-pandemic, as I stated earlier, but we are making growth from 2022 to 2023. So you can see that in most of our grade levels, that we have either remained unchanged or made slight growth in each of those grade levels. And then in grade 8, when I looked at that very small decline, we still had, of our 47 middle school charter academies, we still had 22 of those schools make gains at grade 8. So that's almost half of our middle school charter and academies that were able to still demonstrate growth at that grade level. So just grade 8 math, another grade level math to just keep an eye on. So one of the other things we look at as a district is how are our cohorts doing? And so we define cohort as an identified grade level, and we compare that same group of students over time. So for example, our students who were grade 3 pre-pandemic are now, last year for school year 23, were 7th grade students. So those students who were continuously enrolled in our district those 4 years is who we're, an example of who we're looking at. So cohort analysis can be one indication of how each grade level is doing with the same group of students and compares those over time. But again, different circumstances, instruction, attendance could impact those cohorts differently depending on circumstances, but still we like to look at that same set of students over time, and they need to be consistently enrolled. So students who are consistently enrolled year after year after year are those students that we're educating in our district, and we really like to look at our supports, our instruction, our curriculum, our resources. Are they having a positive impact on those students that are staying here with us in Prince George's County? The cohort shows overall performance over time. It illustrates how those students who are enrolled multiple years or year after year are doing. And it also controls for student mobility out of the district. So our first cohort looks at for our general population of students in grades 3 to 8. It's difficult to look at a cohort of students for high school because we only have Algebra 1 and English 10 as a measure, so it gets a little bit more complicated for high school. So you'll see that grade 6 to 10 has that missing bar for grade 9 for reading. But if you look at the end counts at the bottom, on average, each grade level has about 9,000, some 10. So if you look at those end counts, we're looking at 2/3 or more of our students are staying continuously enrolled in our district. So that's a great sign. You're also seeing in reading English language arts that those same students who are continuously enrolled are continuing to grow and make progress and be proficient often. If you look at the first cohort, grade 3 to 6 to 7, those students made almost 20 percentage points of growth. That's considering the pandemic, too. So, these are the positive signs that we want to see in looking at are our cohorts of students making growth over time. When we switch to math, we see a little bit different of a trend. Very big dip between grade 3 and grade 6. So when I started to think about what this means, what does that look like? As an educator, I going to do visits at schools, you hear kids say things like, we don't really learn very well online. We didn't have the opportunity to have tactile manipulatives. We didn't have the opportunity to kind of work with our cooperative groups and peers. So, some of this might be reflected in elementary school standards and math to middle school. That's challenging for our students. So not seeing as much growth with our cohorts in math, but hopefully, that sign for grade 3 to grade 6 and 7 saw a very small increase. So hopefully students, now that they can be back in school in person regularly, we can see some more growth in those cohorts. So our students who are Black or African American are also follow a very similar trend in looking at, making great strides, great growth over time in our cohorts. Similar trend and pattern in mathematics. Our students who are Hispanic Latino, also very similar trend. But I do want to point out that if you look at our cohort that starts with grade 5 and goes to grade 10, we did have about 2,000 students in that cohort. But those students made double the amount of growth between grades 5 and grade 10. So I want to note that's a very positive trend, and it's an interesting trend to see, thinking about, some things that students had to experience over the pandemic. So the other cohort performance student groups we looked at were our free and reduced students, our EL students, and our students with disabilities. We followed those similar cohorts. Across some of those, we did see some steady increases in proficiency, as well as some of those student groups demonstrated some decreases in proficiency as well. But these are cohorts that we try to keep track of year after year, because we really want to see our students who are continuing to stay enrolled as Prince George's County students, that we are serving them with the best of our ability and providing all the resources that they need. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Strader to talk about our multi-tiered analysis.
Okay, so what do we mean by multi-tier analysis? Jimmy, if you advance to the next slide. When you look over the state data, the data that was used to craft those ratings that we just saw up there on the state maps, this is the data that it's based on. So if you were to go out to the MSDE website, you'll see performance out there identified by the typical racial groups as well as student service groups. So when you look at this, you can see up top, basically all students, PGCPS, again focusing on English language arts here, we're falling about 10 percentage points shy of the state. When you look down across the racial groups, you'll see that our Black African Americans are the only student group here that it's exceeding the state average. When you transition to the next slide, you'll see that focusing on just student groups now, there are 2 student groups that are outperforming the state, that being our English learners, slightly outperforming the state, as well as our students that are receiving free and reduced meal services. So when you look at this data and you look at all the other student groups and racial groups that are contributing, if you go back a slide, like in particular, if you look at our Hispanic population, you'll see that, wait a minute, our Hispanics seem to be about 2 percentage points less or falling behind the state within the performance. But one of the challenges we have in this district is we know our student population is very unique in the state. And on the cover slide, if you go back one more, the uniqueness of the district was actually recognized. If you recall back when Amazon was shopping for a location to place their headquarters, they moved over to the Virginia area. And this article by the Forum Research Group actually hit the nail on the head when they identified that, I think they made a wrong decision. when they quoted academic achievement as one of the reasons for locating in the Virginia area, they missed the mark. And they missed it why? Because they didn't control on our demographics when looking at academic achievement. So this is something, I'm going to share this with the upcoming slides here for you to take a look at. So go ahead and advance now. So what do I mean of how our demographics within this district is unique from the state? So when you look at this, our demographics within this district, we are 94% students of Black African American descent as well as Hispanic Latino descent. 94%. That is very different than the state as a whole. So when comparing our population with our other outside state colleagues, it is like a comparison of apples to oranges. We need a much greater like-for-like comparison. If you transition to the next slide, in particular, when you look at our English learners, we are 1 in 4 students within this district learning English. That's huge. That is going to have an impact on academic achievement of our students in both English language arts and math. So it's important we understand each of our student groups on a 2-tier analysis. It means we have to take one step further beyond just by race and student group. We need to look by race, by EL status, to get a better understanding of our student performance. So let's do that. Let's take a look. If we go and we conduct this multi-tier analysis, here's some of the points that you're going to see. I'm just kind of tipping my hat here a little bit. In ELA in particular, our Black African American students demonstrate proficiency MCAP ELA tests at a higher rate compared to all other Black African American students as their counterparts in the state. The data I'm going to share with is us versus them. It's not us and them compared to us. It's us versus them. So we've isolated us, Prince George's County Public Schools, from the rest of the state. Okay, just to be clear, so we have a good comparison population group here. When EL status, English learning status, is isolated, you will see across all student groups that Prince George's County Public Schools is outperforming their state counterparts. Very different than what you saw on that first slide. Okay? So again, then when we do a similar activity, when we focus on both farms and EL status, free and reduced meal services and EL status, you're going to see something very similar here. So let's take a dive into the data so we can look at some of these charts. So to familiarize yourselves with the charts, blue bars represent Prince George's County Public Schools. The red represents the state. So what you're seeing here is we're looking at our racial groups going down the left side, those racial groups receiving EL services, and their counterparts who are not receiving EL services. So the first piece, Black African American EL students outperforming the state. Second bullet point, Black or African American non-EL students outperforming the state. Look at our Hispanics. Hispanics, Latino ELs, outperforming the state, 11.5% versus 8.2%. And look at our Hispanic Latino non-EL students, 52.6% versus 48.4%. This tells a very different story when you consider the impact of EL on these student groups than if you do not. And for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to focus on that 94%, so I'm going to focus on the Black African American and the Hispanic Latino populations. On the next slide? Okay. So again, now we're looking at race ethnicity groups by free and reduced meals. And you see a similar pattern here. Black African American free and reduced meal students, non-free and reduced meal students, as well as the Hispanic Latino free and reduced meal students are outperforming the state. All of their colleagues within those student groups from the state. The only group not outperforming the state is the Hispanic Latino non-farm students. So we still have some areas of work, but this helps us better refine the populations of students that we need to focus on. This helps us to better understand the needs. Next slide. So when you look at race, ethnicity, and the EL status, again, you look at the top, the overlays of farms and EL status, you can see the similar results. So for the 2 main student groups, we are outperforming the state. Now, when you throw in students with disabilities into the equation, so your Black African American students receiving special education services, as well as those not receiving special education services, the gaps widen. Again, they're outperforming the state. The Hispanic Latino populations, you can see, we have some areas of work here. And then when you combine all three of them, they tell the story again across all three of the areas. Again, that's looking at Black African Americans, farms, students with disabilities, and you can keep going on and on and on with your tiered overlays here to get a better understanding of our students' needs and where our areas of concerns are. So again, English language arts, when you overlay that tier of EL services and free and reduced meal services and students with disabilities, looking at those special education services, it tells a very different story than if you just do that single tier analysis of where our students are. Now in mathematics, transitioning again, our Black African American students demonstrate proficiency on the MCAT test at a rate similar to the students of the rest of the state. When you're talking about significance, you're right there. Is there a statistical significance difference between our students and the state? No. Isolating on EL shows the gap between Hispanic Latinos within PGCPS and their counterparts throughout is narrowed. So the multi-tier analysis, although we are still falling behind the state, the gap is much more narrow when you control an EL. That makes sense. Our students are still mastering English. That's going to have an impact on their mathematics performance. All right, when free and reduced meals participation is considered, Black African American students in PGCPS demonstrate proficiency at a higher rate than their counterparts against the rest of the state. And this is what it looks like. So the state results, again, that single tier analysis, they show that we are falling behind in every slice here. And look at the gaps. The gaps are considerable. Again, this is if you were to go to the MSDE website, Maryland State Department of Education website, this is as deep as you can get within their data. You can choose by race, you can choose by student group. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. So again, this is what you will see on their site. Now, when you control on EL services, EL status, you can see now it begins to narrow a bit. So again, we are still performing behind the state slightly. Our Black African American students are very close. There's like we got a rounding piece here. It's like it's in the hundredths of a difference between our Black African American students and those of their counterparts throughout the rest of the state. But you can see across the other areas, the average percent difference for like our Hispanics and so forth were in double digits, and here you can see oftentimes they're within single digits. Next slide. So when you consider free and reduced meals receiving students, in addition to race, ethnicity, you can see now our Black African American students, those that are receiving free and reduced meal services, so more of our impoverished Black African American population is now exceeding the state average. And then when you overlay our EL status on top of that, you can see Black African American farms, non-EL students are exceeding state. So again, it's important for us, instead of just saying what we need to do for our Black population or Hispanic Latino population or whatever, we need to cut deeper into the data to get a better understanding of those student groups that are in need of additional supports. And it continues. You can now look at students with disabilities. Again, the top line, Black African American students with disabilities are actually outperforming their state counterparts. And transitioning to the next, when you overlay free and reduced meal services with students with disabilities, you can see both Black African American populations receiving students with disability services and farms, as well as those not receiving farm services, both exceed the state average. And the gaps within our Hispanic populations greatly decrease. So I mentioned before, another area of which we need to spend some time looking into, and that is addressing that research question: what is the effectiveness of our EL and our SE programs, our English learning programs, and our students with disabilities programs? How effective are these programs? Because oftentimes when you look at our data, unfortunately, our students with disabilities data, as soon as those students exit, they're no longer considered within that data after a certain period of time. So we wanted to focus on that effectiveness to see how our students are performing. And the data is amazing when you take a look at this. So this first slide you see right here is focusing on our ELA MCAP test data. That first bar you see on the left side is the average proficiency of students receiving EL services. That's 12%. The next bar is that average proficiency of non-EL students. That's 44%. So when you see this data, you're going to say, wow, we're really not doing well by our EL students. Well, that's because they're in the middle of the program. Look what happens when they're able to exit the program. When they test out of the program, those students are at 58.7% proficiency. Students that are exiting our EL services are actually outperforming their non-EL counterparts by almost 10, well, more than 10%. That's amazing. And that's something we should be celebrating with our ESOL teachers and with our communities. In mathematics, well, I'm sorry. Now you're looking at the next grade span here, what you're seeing here. So when you're looking at mathematics, it's a similar trend, not quite as drastic as with the ELA. Our EL math students are at 3.2%. Their non-EL students are at 13.4%. Those students exiting EL services are at 13.1%, just 0.3% behind their non-EL counterparts. So again, look at that jump between that first column and that third column. So then we wanted to look at, so how long, what is the average duration? If you're looking to evaluate how effective our programs are, what's the average duration within these programs and their performance within these programs? It was interesting to note that students receiving EL services for 2 years or less are actually our highest performing students when you're looking at the outcome. And the end counts are included there, so you can see what's happening as far as how long our students are receiving these services. So it was interesting to note the majority, you can see the highest performance are students in 0 to 2 years. That's roughly 2,000 kids in ELA. 3 to 5 years is where the bulk of our students sit. They're still 55.6% in ELA, and there's 4,600 kids in that middle bar. So although the majority of our students are sitting in that middle bar, they're still at 56% proficient in the third year. So just another point, math is represented on the right side. Again, performance outdoes regular counterparts. All right, so looking at this, we did the same thing, looking at students with disabilities. And with students with disabilities, we had a similar trend. So the first column, students with disabilities, you can see the percentage there. The middle trend is the non-students receiving special education services. And then the last is the exited students from receiving special education services. The trend continues. Our exiting students are right there with the non-SE students. So again, another point to celebrate with our special education teachers, our students exiting these services. This just tells a good story about the effectiveness of these programs as students are able to exit. The next slide here is at the high school level. Again, now you can see at the high school level when thinking, well, you can through all the grades, 4, 5, 6, 7, and geometry, you can see this as well. Look at the trend here between the first bar, special ed, as well as the highest in math. They're exiting these programs at a much higher performance level than those students when they first entered the programs. So good stories to be shared here within our programs themselves. And again, it's important for our district, as the Fordham Institute acknowledged within their research, it's important for us to take a closer look to create more like-for-like comparisons of our student groups compared to our student groups outside of our state, our counterparts across the state, for us to be able to have a better understanding of our story. So with that said, I'll turn it back over to Jamie to discuss the reporting components and the cusp of our proficiency.
So we prepared 2 slides for you to talk about who are our students who are not quite proficient, but they're right on the edge of being developing learners to being proficient. So when we look at our district as a whole, about half of our students, and this is grades 3 to English 10, about half of our students are developing learners, which is a great story because you see our below or beginning learners, we have a very, very small portion of our students demonstrating that they are beginning learners in reading. So it's definitely something to celebrate. But when you look at that a little bit further, those students who are developing, how many of those students are actually very close to being proficient? And so looking at how many of those students, we're looking at students who are about 10 scale score points away. So students who are scoring 740 scale score points to 750. So when we look at that, we're seeing about 20 to 25% of our students, and you're talking if you added all of those up, about 13,000 to 14,000 of our students are very, very close to demonstrating proficiency in reading and writing. So we wanted to also take this a little step further in saying, well, 10 scale score points, what does that mean? So we just started to kind of look at what that means. And so a majority of our students are earning less points on the constructed response items than they could be. So our students are not quite at the level of writing proficiency as they could be. If we increased that kind of tiered instruction for our students to become more proficient writers about what they're reading, these numbers would probably be much, much higher. We would see actually less students in the developing, more students in the proficient. Because on the MCAP assessment, there are 3 different writing components that students have to write about their text, and they're on average worth between 12 and 17 to 19 points. A lot of those developing learners scored between 0 and 3 points. So you can see if we bolster our writing instruction and have kids more respond to what they're reading, that would definitely help bolster our students who are proficient in writing. Math is a little bit similar, but we're seeing actually more students in our beginning learner, which is not uncommon when you look at our data, that you're seeing about half of our students still in that beginning learner, below learner category. However, you do see a larger amount of students in our developing, and you can see between 10 to 14% of those students, had they increased their scores by 10 scale score points or more, would be in the proficient. So in looking at that, you're talking about 7,000 students. But again, when you look at math has about 6 constructed response items. Some of those refer to modeling, and some of those refer to reasoning items. But similar points. Out of those items, they're worth a total of 3 points each. We were seeing some of those developing learners score about 0 to 1 points on those items when they could, potentially increase their proficiency percentage had they responded a little bit more to a question about modeling or reasoning. So it's not only that kids are 10 scale score points away, which is important to know, but it's why are they 10 scale score points away? And when we look at the data preliminarily, we know it's because of their constructed response answers on the reading and the writing assessment. So definitely gives us something instructionally to look at, to how we can, increase some data-driven instruction in the classroom to help prepare teachers to work with some of their students, increase their writing. So the last 2 slides just kind of speak to the results, because these are what's important to our teachers to analyze this information, to include it in their data-driven instruction. So the first thing is the parent student report. It's called the individual student report that goes home. Many of these have already been sent to schools. These should be going home to parents and families by October the 20th. We do have a 30-day window from the time that the school receives this report to make sure that it is sent home to the parents and families to let them know how their students did. Also, when this goes home, this is accompanied by a letter, very short letter, has 3 paragraphs, to let the parent and family know what this is. And then we've also created a 4-page kind of front and back document for how parents and families can interpret this information. This is also helpful to provide for our teachers, because we do have a lot of new teachers in our district, teachers who have not been in the state of Maryland, who have not seen these score reports before. So those documents not only help parents and families, but teachers, we just had parent-teacher conferences on Monday, to have those conversations with parents about what does this mean? How, I see the scale score, the proficiency level, but what does this mean for my child? So we need to better prepare our teachers to have these conversations with parents and families. And the way that we do that, at least at the state levels, the state provides several different tiered reports. We can look at our evidence statements, which really basically look at how our students did in relation to the standards-based instruction. So we can look at how students did across a continuum of lowest performing standards, highest performing standards. Our teachers use these reports to ensure that they are hopefully planning for data-driven instruction for differentiated groups, small groups, individual instruction. There's a content standards roster, demographics, performance level summary, reporting category summary. The most important, though, and we also have this on our district assessments, is the item analysis report. This actually looks at each item that students saw, encountered, completed on the assessment, and how students did on that item. So we look at how many students got each item correct. In our district assessments, we can look at the students who did not get the item correct, but what answer they selected. We can also look at how a student responded in writing. Some students leave some of those constructed responses blank, and sometimes no answer is an answer. So this item analysis report, not only at the district but the state level, is very important in ensuring that we are infusing this data that we are getting back into instructional planning. And all school-based users have access to these reports. And, schools often, will reach out to our office, and we set up office hours and some times to go over this information with schools so they have a better understanding of the data that they are receiving and how they can use that to not only teach but talk to parents and families. And that is it.
So I'd like to thank Dr. Strader and members of the accountability team. We know that data is extremely important. We will continue to utilize data to drive our instruction, as she indicated. Madam Chair and members of the board, we'd like to shift gears here just a little bit and really talk a little bit about the how and the what. So I'm going to invite Dr. Judy White and her team to really dive right into 2.2, which is, of course, on interventions, specifically around math. So if you don't mind, I'd like to invite Dr. White to the podium or to the mic.
Good evening, everyone. So originally, we were coming and talking about mathematics and intervention this evening. Dr. Strader did present on our math and reading data. So at the end of our presentation, we will provide also just some slight information on reading interventions because I thought it was appropriate for the evening. This evening, my team has come. I'm excited. I have with me the Director of Curriculum Instruction, Dr. Kia McDaniel. I have our Associate Superintendent of Special Education, Ms. Trinell Bowman. I have all 3 of my mathematics supervisors at the elementary level, Janida Nelson Generette, Michelle Dyson, and Stephanie McLeod. I have Melissa Canny, who is my supervisor of ESOL, and I have our coordinating supervisor, Victoria Holmes of Language and Literacy. Did I get everybody? All right, I got everybody without looking, yes. They do the magic, and so I'm inviting them up to what you will see and what our theme has been and what our theme will be all year long is not just talking about mathematics, but how do we look at mathematics, especially from the lens of our special education students and our multilingual learners. So this evening, we will go through some of the mathematics interventions, and of course, what I've provided you also is because I know you all ask a lot of times about those specific things. You have a document, and we made it a little larger for you so that you could see our different interventions. What you see on that document is not just our interventions, but we wanted you to understand what content it addresses, the description and goal, so why do we use that intervention, the student access, who is it for, where does it show up? Does it show up in our curriculum or does it live outside of our curriculum? Is it a tutoring or is it an intervention? What's the data reports that we get for each one, when it is used, and the frequency by which it should be used? So with that, I turn it over to Dr. McDaniel.
Thank you. Some of the work we've been doing around interventions across the curriculum. And so, as you know, all of the work that we do is always grounded in the student learner profile and the instructional framework. And so all of the interventions that you'll be hearing about this evening really provide students with the opportunity to set goals. It allows them to think critically in different ways across the content. And so the interventions also are a part of the core learning experiences that our students participate in and outside of class, and are definitely aligned to the curriculum. So there's been a lot of work done in just the selection of the interventions that our students are engaged in to make sure that they are aligned to the work that they're doing in the core content classroom. So you've just heard a lot about our MCAP scores, where our students are, and so each of our core content areas have really focused in on a particular area where they want to make sure that we are supporting students where they are and taking them to the next level. And so whether the focus for a particular area is on the instructional pieces, on what's actually happening within the classroom and focusing on a particular instructional strategy, or if it's around professional development, we know that all of that is going to end in increased academic achievement for our students. And so I just want to highlight for mathematics specifically, we are making sure to support the diverse needs of our students and increasing the amount of interventions and tutoring that's available to our students across the district. You heard some data, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on, around writing, and so just improving the stamina, our students' writing stamina, not only in English language arts, but you'll see that in our social studies classes and our science classes as well. So when we look at just the core mathematics instruction, you'll know that at the elementary level, our students are getting a minimum of 60 minutes per day at the elementary level K-2. And as they increase across the grade levels, they have more time in grades 3 to 5. I'm sorry, our minimum is 75 minutes at the K2 level, and then they'll move to at least 60 minutes. And again, this is the minimum based on the schedule at each school. Our middle school students are engaged in a block schedule, and so they are getting between 55 minutes and 72 minutes of instruction a day. And that may be increased if there is an intervention block for students where they are able to participate in some of these interventions that we're going to be talking about this evening and get an extra support session in mathematics in middle school. At the high school level, again, we're in block scheduling, and so our students are engaged in mathematics at least 90 minutes every other day. And then we may have a targeted group of students who are enrolled in our math lab. And so that math lab in and of itself serves as an intervention to provide additional support in mathematics for our students that need that extra support at the high school level. So regardless of the level, you will see in any math classroom across the district, As the curriculum is implemented with fidelity, you'll see our students engage in real-world tasks that they can relate to, and they'll be going in and out of whole group instruction, independent activities, and small group activities as they are going through all of the core standards within the curriculum. As you all know, we do have our systemic focus on mathematics that we are continuing from last school year. And this school year, while you see the same 8 components here that we're really drilling down on across the district, we have a specific focus on differentiation for our students with disabilities and our students who are multilingual learners. And so as our principals are going into classrooms, as our teams are going out, helping to coach teachers, not only are we focused on the core content that's going on in mathematics classrooms, but how it's differentiated for those populations of students, how the academic language shows up for them, how those scaffolds show up for them, and of course, how the interventions show up for them as well. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our elementary mathematics supervisor to walk through the interventions and core instruction at that level. Well, that's okay.
Okay. Good evening. I am going to briefly discuss the interventions and resources that we use at the elementary level to support our students. I wanted to point out that at the elementary level resources for any resources, we take the formative, interim, and summative data results to inform our next steps through a 3-tier approach. With our Tier 1 supports, we include Dreambox Math for K through 5, and then also Carnegie Learning on Demand for grades 3 through 5. Tier 2, our targeted response for some students, that is for our students in grades through 1 through 5, and do the math, excuse me. I don't know why I always get nervous at the live board meetings. Virtual, I'm good to go. Let me start over. Tier 2, we have do the math for grades 1 through 5. And then I'm so happy that our small group tutoring that we have for Carnegie Learning is offered not just to our tested grades, but also our primary grades, K through 2. So K through 5 for Carnegie Learning. And then our Tier 3, we do include do the math as an additional, another way to support our students that have needs that are intensive. And then our Tier 2 and Tier 3 are for those students that are not meeting proficiency on those formative, summative, or interim data. And so through this 3-tier approach, our goals are to increase math achievement at the elementary level. And then I'm so excited to hear that our elementary students are improving and growing. We have additional work to do, but we have faith. So I'm going to start off with Dreambox. This is our Tier 1 support that is for all students. It provides differentiated support, it's digital, and it supplements our K-5 core curriculum. It's used either in learning stations, small group instruction, or through independent practice or technology centers. The recommendation is that students complete 5 or more lessons. And Dreambox was chosen because it's the only digital math support that has an ESSA rating of strong. This year, we've implemented the Launchpad baseline assessment, which sets a student's initial standing, and then we see growth throughout the year when we compare that initial standing to where they are as they complete those lessons. There also includes usage reports, growth reports, and then also a standard proficiency report that shows where the students are performing across standards. So this is Tier 1 for all of our students. Additionally, we have on-demand tutoring for our 3rd through 5th grade students, and this is an opportunity for our students to have on-demand drop-in sessions, one-on-one. They can call in for support with homework, skills that they've had difficulties with, and this is all parents can sign up their students through Clever. This is, again, Tier 1 for all students. We started September 18th, and sessions are Monday through Thursday, and we also provide Saturday sessions. For monitoring, we have attendance data. We also have reflection and feedback responses, and we get participation by school. That information is collected as well. For Tier 2, we also have small group tutoring. And again, this is for K-5 students, because one of the things I always tell, especially my primary teachers, we look at 3 through 5 because of those are the tested grades, but we know all the math they learn in K2 supports all future math. So we have to also, not just K2, let me take that back, pre-K to 2, because those foundational skills they get there is the foundations for algebra, calculus, and all of that. So we do have Carnegie small group tutoring offered to students in grades K through 5, and these are the students that are not meeting proficiency based on the data, and so we're trying to make sure that they get those supports needed prior to that summative assessment, whether it's an end-of-year assessment or MCAP. We're currently in round 1, and this will run into December 4th. We have additional rounds beginning in January and in April, and then we also have a summer session. Students attend 1-hour sessions 2 days a week. And then we get pre and post assessment to measure growth, weekly assessments to monitor progress, and also attendance data. In addition, we have Do the Math. This is an intervention, again, for some students who have not shown progress with grade level standards. This is for grades 1 through 5, and they provide intensive lessons. There's 30 lessons per module, and it builds on those conceptual understanding and skill development around addition and subtraction, multiplication, division, and fractions. Schools can choose when they implement Do the Math, and they are usually choosing to implement either before school, during the day, or after school. With Do the Math, there's pre and post assessment data used to measure growth for each module, and then there's also an assessment at every 5th lesson to monitor progress. And those are the intervention and supports for elementary. So I want to pass the mic to my secondary colleagues.
Good evening. I'm here to discuss what's occurring at the middle school level. First, I want to bring your attention to this visual in front of you. And just like at the elementary level, we follow the 3-tier approach as well at the secondary level. But specifically for middle school mathematics, when you look at our Tier 1, which is the base of the triangle, that's what the supports that are provided to all of our students. What are the supplemental resources and interventions that we put in place to support those students? And again, we use data, and data to make instructional decisions in mathematics. So for Tier 1, that's where we use our formative assessments, because formative assessments are ongoing, they're continuous, and they are immediate and timely for students. Tier 2 is where our Tier 2 instruction is for a specific group of targeted students that we provide support, and that's when we use our interim data, and that interim data is our common assessments, it may be our benchmark, and then sometimes data is used from previous year MCAP scores. And then our tiered, that is our highly targeted, individualized, intensive intervention. And as you see with the triangles, the groups get smaller as you go up the triangle. But again, the base, the foundation. We can go, it's me. Okay, there you go. So let's take a look at it at the middle school level for Tier 1, 2, and 3. At Tier 1, what I want to bring your attention to, it is for all students. It takes place in the classroom. And at the middle school level, we have something called data days, and that's when you're going to see teachers implementing some of our supplemental resources there. So what happens, our teachers are receiving instructional guidance document with lessons, and as they teach by topics, and topics usually range between 3 to 5 days, and at the end of that topics, teachers are gathering ongoing data, and they're making instructional decisions, but on that data day is when you're going to see small group instruction. And during that small group instruction, you will see teachers targeting groups of students. So it's ongoing. It's not always the same group of students. It's based off of what we're learning at that time and what students need. So some of the supplemental resources that are used for interventions or for supports, we have IXL Math, we use Mobius Math, and Speak Agent. Each one of these mathematic intervention programs, supplemental programs, have a uniqueness to how it supports our curriculum work. We do not purchase cookie cutter programs. When we work with vendors, we want our vendors to make sure that they are tailoring their program to meet the needs of our population of students. We want them to make sure that they are aligning their content to what we want our students to know and be able to do. So with IXL, we have created skill path programs. So when students take their readiness assessments for their units, their common assessments, benchmark data. Teachers then analyze that data. Then they go right into IXL and they identify Johnny needs this skill based off of his score on readiness assessment. This standard, he needs some additional practice. Or Michelle needs additional support with this standard. And that's how students continue to practice those standards that they need as they are learning the current grade level content. Mobius Math is used. It is a digital program that builds fluency. And when I say build fluency, I'm not just saying 5 times 5 is 25. It's really showing students how to build conceptual fluency. So you'll see students using number lines on this program. You'll see tape diagrams. So you'll see all those mathematical models and representations that we want students to be able to reason through when they have to answer and respond to those constructive responses on our MCAP assessments, building their stamina for that. And then we have Speak Agent, and you're going to learn a little bit more about Speak Agent as we go throughout this presentation. But Speak Agent is our program that takes mathematics content and aligns it to academic language. So how do we build academic language so when students have to reason, they have to write about mathematics, they have the academic language to do that. So that is our Tier 1 at middle school level. Again, this is for all students. Then we move to Tier 2, which is a small group intervention. Tier 2 interventions do not take place in the classroom. These are outside of the classroom supports. And at the middle school level, we have small group tutoring with Carnegie Learning. But then some of the schools offer math fluency. It's a math fluency course where students go, and within that particular course, they use a program called Mathia, but it is blended because we do not just put our students on technology without having a teacher to provide some instructional support. So again, in your math fluency course, you should see blended learning if you was to visit. You will see some students working with the teachers while others are working on our Mathia program. And again, with the small group intervention, as you can see the duration, the sessions are usually 20 to 50 minutes. The frequency is 2 to 4 times a week, and it usually lasts between 10 to 15 weeks because those targeted students, we collect data, which is baseline data. We want to see, are our students making growth? Are they actually achieving what we needed them to achieve when they are in our small group interventions? And Tier 3 is our, for middle school, we have our academic resource, and you're going to learn a little bit more about that as we continue to go throughout this presentation, but it is very targeted. It's for our students with disabilities who have IEP math. On their IEPs, they have math intervention. But we have some students that have not been identified, but they also need that intense support, so they also receive support through Tier 3. And at the Tier 3, we use the academic resource course. Again, just like math fluency, they use a different program, which is iReady. However, it is a blended learning program as well. So you should see students engaging in technology as well as working with their teacher during that block of instruction. Then we also have another tutoring program, and this tutoring program supports our iReady students. So the students receive support during their academic resource, but then in the evenings and on Saturdays, they can actually participate in individual tutoring or group tutoring sessions. What's common about Tier 1, 2, and 3 at the middle school, we have 3 critical components that really drives this work. The first is that we believe that students have to have ownership in this work. So the first component of that is we want students to be goal setters. So they set goals for each one of these interventions of how they're going to grow in the work. And then we want students to reflect on the work. The next component that is common across is teacher feedback. None of this means anything if students are not receiving feedback about how they're performing. And then the last one is monitoring, monitoring, and monitoring. So at the middle school level, this represents the intervention and supports and programs that we have in place for our middle school students, all middle school students.
Good evening. I'm going to speak to the high school mathematics program. I'm going to start with Tier 1. For Tier 1, we have Mathia, which is a classroom support that students can get on. It is online, and the teacher can assign them certain modules. This is for geometry and algebra, for geometry students through Algebra 2. So any students enrolled in geometry through Algebra 2 are able to access this program. The Mathia program uses data usage reports and provides details about the students back to the teacher, and it allows the teacher to change and or add more content to the student to go through in their portal and in the modules. For Tier 2, we have small group tutoring, just as they do in middle and elementary, which is provided through Carnegie Learning. On-demand sessions that started September the 18th. And like for middle and high and elementary, we receive attendance reports that have the detail as to attendance with respect to student performance and the pre and post assessment data. Small group tutoring for high school Algebra 1 is a specialized Carnegie Learning sessions that we hold for just students enrolled in Algebra 1. That is 10-week sessions. The first one started on October the 2nd. It's a similar program, but it's intense just for the Algebra 1 students, and we also have it for SAT prep. So it's the same small group tutoring sessions held for SAT prep, which also began on October the 2nd. At Tier 3 in high school, we have an in-school tutoring program through Carnegie Learning, which is Mathia. It allows those students in our math lab classes. We have an Algebra 1 lab, which is our in-school intervention. So if a student is struggling in Algebra 1, and you would know this prior to the student coming to the school because you have the data to say from their middle school and or the MCAP data and teacher recommendation, students are placed in lab and they have the opportunity to receive that one-to-one support from a teacher as well as the Mathia program to support them and build that content that they may have be missing and or struggling with. I think that does it for me. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to share a little bit about the supports that we have for our multilingual learners in the district. We have been working with the mathematics department for many years, and we have an academic language toolkit that was developed and incorporates the strategies and supports that our mathematics teachers should use to ensure that our secondary multilingual learners can access the mathematics content. We also have various professional development. In 2019, we developed a core set of ELD strategies that we have been training all teachers in the district on that ensure that our multilingual learners have the linguistic supports they need to be successful in the classroom. And so we have adapted those and ensured that we help our elementary math teachers as well as numeracy coaches understand how to meet the needs of our multilingual learners in the mathematics classroom. Dr. Dyson spoke about SpeakAgent. We started using SpeakAgent in 2016 in our mathematics classrooms, It is a tool that helps our students to be successful and is specifically aligned with the mathematics curriculum. It helps the students to access the academic language they need and incorporates the listening, speaking, reading, and writing activities that they need to develop those critical skills to ensure that they can communicate in the math classroom. There are various ways that we receive reports from Speak Agent that show students' data, but we also have regular formative assessments that help our teachers to dig deeper into the language our students need to be successful in the middle school mathematics classroom. And now I'm going to turn it over to Trinell.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. This slide just provides you with the approach that we take in supporting students with disabilities throughout the district and the partners that we work with. We believe in a collective impact, that we have to work together to improve the educational outcomes for students with disabilities. We work collaboratively with our math office, the National Training Network, which is a network that provides us with mathematic coaches that goes out to our schools. We also partner with the Gold Book Toolkit that provides us with evidence-based strategies that focus on mathematics. We also work to provide specially designed instruction and high-level practices trainings to our principals and teachers, and then we have our Access, Equity, and Progress Grant that we get through the Maryland State Department of Education. This is just a timeline that really speaks to the work that we have done as it relates to building out our mathematics support and collective collaborations. When we look at supporting mathematics, we look at it through these three different lenses. Our NTN training and coaching, they do quarterly walkthroughs in our buildings, provide feedback to our teachers to really build their capacity to teach mathematics to students with disabilities. From our PGCPS, when we look at our specially designed implementation, we are supporting, you heard this earlier, a systemic approach with our principals and assistant principals, and then we also support learning walks. We have developed a specially designed fidelity tool that allows us to take baseline data, coach our teachers, and then come back periodically to see if they're making gains. Our data sources to monitor achievement, we're always looking at our intervention data, and then we have milestone tasks that we also look at for reasoning and modeling, as well as our quarterly benchmarks. We also have taken a multi-sensory approach to supporting mathematics. This is, again, aligned to our science of reading. And so we've had about 122 participants that participated from October of 2022 to March of 2023. 75 different school attendees participated, and you can kind of see the coaching sessions and what the area of content focus on for mathematics. You have already heard Dr. Dyson give you an update about iReady Mathematics, and that is a Tier 3 intervention for students with disabilities. And you can see in the last column, I just want to lift up that we do monitor that with our students by looking at how they're performing at the beginning of the year, mid-year, and end of the year through a diagnostic assessment, and then we review that data and provide that feedback to schools. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McDaniel.
Well, I'm going to be turning it right back over to our ELD and special education team, but I did just want to highlight, as you all know, we have transitioned from balanced literacy to structured literacy, or the science of reading, and so that requires new materials for our classroom. And so here you can just see some of the core materials and the interventions that are used throughout our elementary curriculum to really ensure that students are getting that structured reading. And we just want to also highlight that we do teach cursive, we do teach handwriting. That is a part of our core curriculum, and so you can see the materials that are utilized there. And so now we'll hear a little bit more about what some of the specific supports are for our students who are English or multilingual learners and students with disabilities.
So I'll talk a little bit about specifically what we do for reading. I shared about the key ELD strategies, and on this slide you can see specifically what the 7 key ELD strategies are. They were developed in 2019 and are research-based, and we have many counties reaching out to us and saying, where's the book on the key ELD strategies? And we say, it's our book, we haven't developed it, but we're working on writing it. So everybody wants to know all about our key LD strategies. We also look at helping and ensuring that we do literacy across all the curriculum, so making sure we're addressing the domains of language, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. We also are looking to ensure we're preventing long-term multilingual learners. As Dr. Strader shared, those students who've been in the ELD program for the longer amount of time, and we offer the language-based instructional supplement to support those students. We talked about writing. We have targeted writing professional development, as writing is one of the weaknesses for our multilingual learners in the greatest area of growth. And then we have integrated content professional development, as our multilingual learners are sitting in every course at the secondary level. We have various interventions or supplemental supports that you can see on this slide that we offer for our multilingual learners throughout the various grades. BrainPop is used K-12. We have reading supports, Learning A to Z, and Lexia and Rosetta Stone. And we also use the high school language lab that's targeting our long-term ELLs. And we have a newcomer academy that we developed in-house. We monitor these implementations with our quarterly speaking and writing assessments that are aligned to WIDA, which is our national assessment that drives our instruction. And I'll now turn it over to Janelle.
So for our reading interventions, we definitely have been on a journey in Prince George's County to improve access for reading interventions for our students. We do a blended model, so all of the interventions we use have an explicit teaching component to it, and it also may have a technology or computer-based component to it. So you can see on this slide our corrective reading that we offer and the focus areas, and by grade, we offer Lexia Core 5 reading grades pre-K through 5. You can see those focus areas. And then we offer Lexia Power Up literacy for grades 6 through 12, and again, you see those focus areas. We also offer Read 180 Systems 44 for grades 6 through 12. Again, you see those focus areas listed there. Sound Sensible for students in grades pre-K through 1. And you can see those the focus area of letter-sound relationship. We also offer Spell Read in grades 3 through 6 for those students who are in our comprehensive special education program. And you can see those focus areas. And then we offer Spire for students in grades 1 through 8, and you see those focus areas. When we look at monitoring our Department of Special Education reading interventions, we have a comprehensive approach that we have really taken to ensure that interventions are implemented with fidelity and that students are making growth. So our team does a biweekly desk audit to monitor intervention usage. If there's low usage, they do follow up with those school teams to include the principal, making them aware of the low usage rates for designated students. We do quarterly progress report monitoring to include the diagnostic completion and growth. We talked a little bit earlier about, for example, iReady does have different diagnostic points that we take, and so we do follow up on that quarterly progress to monitor our students. We also have weekly office hours with our intervention team where schools can call to get help, technical assistance, follow-up coaching. We also do coaching individually or by school teams, and then we do instructional observations. So we do have, for each of our interventions you saw listed, we do have fidelity checks when we go out and do those observations. And now we're going to do writing supports.
So for the last portion of our presentation this evening, we just wanted to highlight some of the supports that are available around writing. So you heard about how our students are performing with writing on the MCAP, and we know that we need to improve writing stamina for our students. And so at the secondary level, we have integrated our TutorMe support into the classroom. And so students are getting extra support not only from their teachers, but by using the tutors that provide writing support, feedback on their writing, and additional opportunities to write throughout the day within the middle school classroom. And so every student set up an account with TutorMe and is using that as an opportunity to improve their writing both at home and during the day. While that's open, TutorMe is open for every student in the district, we're using it in a targeted manner at the middle school level. And at the high school level, we have a program called No Red Ink that, again, provides students with just additional writing opportunities, and not just formal writing opportunities, but those quick writes, opportunities to improve their grammar, their conventions of writing, and just making sure that they know about the drafting process of writing and what it takes to be a good writer. And so as we wrap up this evening, our team will share some of the specific writing supports for students with disabilities and our multilingual learners.
So I'll tell you a little bit about what we do for our multilingual learners in writing. Again, we focus on our key ELD strategies, and you can see there are 4 particular strategies that we target when we're looking at writing, and they're highlighted there with the arrows. When we think about writing, we noticed that it was a gap at elementary, and we actually developed a writing toolkit for multilingual learners. It's based in the patterns of wonder and the patterns of power. When we looked at teachers who actually used it with fidelity, we saw great growth with our writing on access, and so we're looking at integrating that into our middle school and high school courses as well as we develop curriculum writing. We also use writing in, if I might highlight, Speak Agent. As we talked about in math, there is a core component of writing that allows our multilingual learners to write not only during their ELA and ELD classes, but also in the mathematics classroom. And we are also looking at using Speak Agent in high school for our applications in algebra class, where we'll be incorporating writing. As you can see, we offer many different professional development. We offer it to help our teachers analyze the writing and drive instruction, as well as helping them to understand how to better their instruction with strategies for teaching writing for our multilingual learners. And I will turn it over to Chanel.
And I will conclude our presentation this evening with the embedded writing supports for students with disabilities. You can see that we've listed by intervention those interventions that support writing supports for our students. So when we look at dictation and sentence development, you see those 3 reading interventions there. When we look at encoding or spelling support, we've listed those interventions that focus on that area. For writing supports, as far as graphic organizers or the use of rubrics that are very important when you're thinking through constructed responses, you'll see those 3 interventions that focus on that. And then handwriting is for sound sensibles. And remember, that was for pre-K to 1st grade. So that wraps up our presentation for this evening for the Division of Academics.
Thank you, Team Academics. We dearly appreciate you. And Madam Chair, that does conclude both 2.1 and 2.2. We'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you so much to you and your team, Superintendent. Thank you so much for you and your team, Superintendent House. That was amazing. Board members, before we proceed, I would like to remind my colleagues that during the first round of questions and responses, you will receive 5 minutes, and for the second round, 3 minutes. Staff will capture any questions that are not answered tonight, and those answers will be provided to all board members. So, the floor is now open for questions.
My light is on.
Now I see a light. Oh, your light, okay, so
She was first, but it's not on.
we must get this fixed.
I'll raise my hand like that.
The chair recognizes Board Member Dr. Juanita Miller.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to compliment the team on such an excellent presentation and in your data analysis and professional development programs, as well as the services, especially those tools that you've created that other jurisdictions are looking to take from us. We do have a great academic program in our system. And I have to stick my chest out for a minute. One of your math teachers, she was a math teacher for special needs division when I was in the system, and now she's a director. Go girl. Our students are really benefiting, and it's 2 of them, but anyway, both of them, they know who I'm talking about. I'm proud of you, that's all I can say. But my concern, and it was a concern that was brought up, we have all of these outstanding programs. what is the follow-through with the parents in terms of being knowledgeable of what you're doing and what is available to them? And you don't have to answer it all, but I just need to know because this was brought out in more than one public forum. Parents concerned about certain aspects that they're not getting. And Ms. Bowman, I'll call your name because special ed was one of the concerns in reference to supportive services. We have programs and services, but it's that area of supportive services. So that's another area that needs to be addressed. And I think that's my comment. I just say you all are doing a fantastic job. It's just making sure that the parents of our students are aware of what's available, the process by which they can gain those services. And for those of you who don't know, that's my background for, well, I'll be telling how old I am, but for many, many years, special needs populations. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Are you looking for a response tonight, or you will
No, they
wait?
can give it to
They
me
can
later.
give
They
it
know
to
how to
later.
reach
Okay,
me.
that's fine, thanks. The chair recognizes Vice Chair Walker.
Excellent job. Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for your presentation. So I'm going to leverage my entire 5 minutes. Thank you for mentioning the communications and awareness. I want to be of help in making sure our parents know the amount of resources that we have available to them, including me as a parent. I was just thinking that, oh my goodness, look at all of this we have, and I'm so educated when I come into this room and we have these work sessions. And if I'm learning something new every single session, that means that there's parents out there that don't know. And so I want to help with the communication on that. And so, Dr. White, you know I love all of your things and put them up everywhere. If we could get this electronically, that would be amazing. I was just thinking about the newsletter that's going out, and I would love to be able to put this there so that people can read across not only what is available, but the intention, the description. This is awesome. So thank you for getting that to us. Newsletter goes out tomorrow, so if you can send it tonight, that'll be amazing. Yeah, just the link. Okay, a link to it, absolutely. Which means this needs to be posted somewhere, but yeah, thank you for the link. All right. A question on, I have a son in secondary mathematics, so that's where I'm concentrating. The communications and awareness, love it. Is this parent opt-in, or is a child assessed at what tier they're in? So for instance, where's my middle school superstar? Yes. So I see that there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And I'm just wondering if I see small groups in tier 2, which are amazing, do I say, oh, my son needs extra practice in this? Can he get a small group or no? How does it work? Mm-hmm. And I assume this is for everybody.
Yes.
That's okay, that's okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, for tier 2 is when school leaders and teachers get together and they look at, analyze the data. And then they make a decision about which students need to attend a math fluency course, or if the student for tier 3 has to go into an academic resource class. So parents are aware, because on the student's schedule, it'll say the student is enrolled in math fluency, and it's usually a semesterized course.
Okay.
So either first semester or second semester.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to continue with my quick comments / questions. Next is celebration was a key word that was used throughout the presentation today. I'm a super fan of that. But how are we celebrating with our schools, our teachers, and our students to actually showcase the wins that we heard about tonight? And then you can get back to me on that one. And really it's because we test the heck out of our kids, right, in order to get this amazing data. And so we're talking about the awesomeness that came as a result, but really when we talk celebration, what are we doing inside of our schools to showcase this to our kids that's been testing and the teachers that's really helping them out? It would be great to know what we are intentionally doing in the classroom so that they can see that. And if we're not, then get back to me on what we're gonna do, because celebration was used a lot today, so we should try to do that. Make sense? Okay, good, good, good. Nobody was like, yeah, okay. I appreciate you breaking down the data to highlight our uniqueness in Prince George's County, and I also heard that we tailor our curriculum to our population. But as these demographics change and the data shifts, I'm just wondering how we go back and take a look at how this is really tailored to our population. You can get back to me on that, but I heard that it's tailored. But when I look at the data today, this is data that might be different from, a couple years. How are we doing that so our scholars continue to rise? Okay. Okay. Yes. Hold, please. Miss Jamie, you don't have to answer, but can we get these achievements? So you talked about we have achievements by school. I don't know where you are anymore. There you are. No, you don't have to come to the mic, but you just talked about we have achievements by school and you have that data. Is it possible for you to just shoot it out so that we can also congratulate those schools too, call them out in our own community shout outs, because that would be awesome to be able to do. Yeah. Exactly. Yes, yes, yes. I'm on seconds, you guys, so let me hurry up. The pressure. Oh, yeah, so I gotta wait. I'll do it next time, next round.
Thank you, Vice Chair Walker. The chair recognizes Board Member Boozer-Struther.
Thank you so much, Chair. So thank you so much for this excellent presentation, and I just want to thank all of you, but thank Dr. Strader for how you are looking at the data and how you've really focused in on demographic populations the last couple years. I've been a pretty outspoken critic of these tests because I feel like it's been inequitable to Prince George's County students. The way it is overall presented at the end of the day, it's these report cards, right? So hopefully my thoughts could come out. There's a lot, so I apologize. I'm going to link a couple things here. In my trajectory as a parent, and then becoming a board member, my son attends Title I, now Blueprint for Maryland's Future Community Schools, high concentration of poverty schools, all with ESOL divisions. So that is my context as a parent and board member is District 3. What I am seeing is like the proof of what we've been doing. So when I started as a parent, it was very clear to me that the ESOL teams were the cultural leaders of our schools, the community schools model before we had the Blueprint model, but they were not funded. So now, and thank you, Dr. McDaniel, for your national leadership. I know I'm seeing the keys, which is kind of new for me, but that it was the 6 principles of teaching English language learners that I believe came out of Prince George's County, and now it sounds like the keys are. The difference is now the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. So if you look at those top 26 out of Prince George's County, of the top 50 in the state, 4 out of District 3 have been community schools since year 1. Ridgecrest, Cool Spring, Nicholas Orem, and half High Point in District 1, but population in District 3. And so are we linking the Blueprint resources to this data growth success? And because the Blueprint for Maryland's Future has to make a case for itself to continue the funding. So can we weave in the stories of the Blueprint in these schools to ensure that we are telling the full story of these investments in our children in our high concentration of poverty schools, linked with, again, congratulations to the ESOL team for these gains. So I don't know how clear that was, but as someone who feels very protective of the Blueprint and the making the case that it's working, I see links here, and I hope that we can make those data links for broader case. And then the other piece is the end of the day, there's this report card, and what I find is that we could show some of these growth successes, but then the report card comes out and it's kind of a letdown because of the way the state MSDE puts these categories into the report card, which is where I think the continued inequity is. That I want to know, can we begin to challenge MSDE on this report card data? And I would say one of the biggest ones is absenteeism, and I did challenge the former state superintendent on this at MABE last week to separate out absenteeism for illness from absenteeism for other reasons. I think obviously we need to know that from a public health perspective, and many reasons that the data is beyond just that number. But now showing what is happening here in Prince George's County, can we collectively use our voice to force some of this change so that the recognition comes down to our school communities and to our principals and the staff who deserve this credit and deserve to see report cards that truly reflect what we heard tonight. So I guess my questions are in there, but I'll stop there. I'm not asking for any answers tonight, but
I will say,
that is just my observation.
Yep, I will say,
Thank you.
First of all, very well said. And I will say, yes, we can speak up to ensure that the stories are weaved into exactly. You know, it's sad in many cases that the focus in many states is on overall performance and not around appreciating the growth. As a turnaround principle, it was the growth that we were allowed to be able to celebrate, and we have to be able to celebrate that growth so that we don't alienate communities and alienate students along the way. So the answer to your question is yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Rain Rivera Forbes. Turn your mic on.
Is it working? Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I first wanted to say thank you so much to the team. I know I'm always saying as a student, I feel so happy just to hear about all the different resources that are being offered to us and seeing the different groups that are working on ensuring that we have a great education. So thank you for that. I have very few questions, and I guess since everyone's getting theirs later, I'll get mine later as well. My first question was, I know that SMART goals were mentioned, and making sure students are holding themselves accountable with goal setting. So I was wondering if that ties into SMART goals and if they're being taught how to set them alongside their tutoring. And then my next question was about the SAT prep tutoring program. I heard a bit about it. I was wondering how students learn about that in their schools, because I know many students, just from what I've heard in the recent listen and learns that we've had in our own General Assemblies, most students don't know about that. So I'm wondering if that's given, well, the information is put out when they're in need of it, or is it just already there and it's something they see online? Alongside that, is everything that was mentioned on Clever? And that's actually, it's on Clever. Okay, it's all on Clever. So just going back to what was mentioned at the last board work session, I think Clever is very resourceful, but I know many students don't know how the different programs can help them on there. So I think finding just a way to make it a bit more accessible and understanding for students to know their resources, because this poster right here is awesome. Like,
Yes, it is.
I understand everything now and how each of these programs can help me and my peers, but I would love them to have an opportunity to be able to see something like this and know it as well. And lastly, is peer-to-peer tutoring something that's involved in these steps as well? I know that's something that's not commonly talked about, but I'm just wondering if that's something that the team is looking into to be implemented. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. You're waiting for your responses, correct? Okay, thank you. The chair recognizes Board Member LaSalle Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very optimistic and happy to see that we're moving in the right direction, so thank you for that. I had some questions about our math, since it seems to be the area where we're working the hardest to get to where we need to be. In terms of the, a couple of questions that I had. The first one was math classroom sizes. How intentional are we about being able to decrease class size, because I know that that has a big impact on our students. We talk for Tier 1, so everybody, right? Are we looking to see that our math classrooms are manageable for our teachers, frankly? So that's one question. The other question that I have for Tier 2, it was mentioned that some schools use Mathia. Which schools, and how do we choose those schools? Also, how small are our small groups? Are they consistently the same number of students, best practice for our students, or is it school to school? The schools that are doing better, are we taking lessons learned and best practices and then teaching our other schools on those? And then in terms of partnering with the families, and we talked a little bit about multisensory approach for student learning, but I'm wondering, what strategies do we have in place to teach our parents to work with their students at home on math concepts? For example, are we also incorporating like math nights? Are we doing any type of support for our families, specifically like board member Rain shared? Clever is a wonderful tool, but a lot of our parents do not know how to access it. They don't know all the components that are in there. So how are we leveraging our partnerships with our families? Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Board Member Zipporah Miller.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair. To the team, congratulations and thank you. We see all the work and the fruits of your labor through everything that you've shown us today, so just congratulations. Let me start with the data. There was the MCAP individual student report card that goes home, and I think you mentioned that you were going to have that you are going to have sessions with teachers so that they understand how to work with or to explain the report card to the parent. So I wanted to see how can we support to ensure that parents are aware that this report card is coming home. That way they can, and encourage them to meet with their teachers. Is there a blurb you can send us that we can send home? And you don't have to answer it now, but I'm just wondering if there are ways that we can ensure that they're looking at it, they're having conversations about it with the teachers. We talked, I think one of the board members asked for the supports for us to send home, so that was done. Then Dr. Schrader, I had been asking MSDE to look at it. I don't know whether this is the first time it's happened where you have teased out the data for Prince George's County and then compared it to Maryland. Is this the first time that it's happened, or?
It is. This required us to get a Freedom of Information Act to get the rest of the student data across the state for us to be able to do this aggregation.
Thank you, because we had gone to a session, I think last fall, Last fall, we had gone to a session where we looked at the 4 major counties. I think it was Howard, Montgomery, and I kept asking, how do we compare? And there were no answers. So thank you for that. So that being said, there's several things that we've talked about celebrating. How are we telling the story as a system? How is communication getting this out in terms of the 50, the 50 most improved schools? There's 26 schools from Prince George's County. Something to celebrate, but the public needs to know that. So how are we telling that story? And then the story where this was just brilliant. I'm in awe with how you took that data, but telling how we outperform the state in so many areas would be something that we really want to celebrate and get out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The chair recognizes Board Member Adam Stafford.
Okay, I'm going to use all 5 of my minutes, but first, let's go, academics. Let's go. I'm so happy. Over the past few years, we've really been pushing for this level of disaggregation of data, and I just want to say thank you so much for providing us with just a wealth of information and the breakdowns that we've been asking for in terms of the interventions. Thank you, thank you, thank you. looking at and kind of piggybacking off of my colleague and thinking about, how do we message this? I'm wondering if we're at the point where we just need to, as a board, just send a letter. Maybe we should send a letter saying to our we send a letter to the state board, just basically asking, for there to be a new, more equitable explanation of student MCAP data, and just actually pushing this through the policy committee and just asking the policy committee to write a letter where it would say, the markers that are being targeted, just maybe asking for, and I'm trying to kind of form this as I'm thinking about it, but, the way that we need to market this is, where is the best place for Black students in Maryland to succeed in blank? Where are Black students succeeding in Maryland? The answer is here, Prince George's County. Here's the data to prove it. And so, I just, maybe at the end of my questions, I'll have a motion in my brain, but I just do appreciate the way that you all are laying that out. I have some questions related to curriculum. And so I know that we're shifting to a curriculum, and tell me if I'm wrong, but we're switching to illustrative math. Has that happened, or am I imagining that? We have a new, okay. So I'm wondering, how do our interventions tie to the curriculum shifts that we're going to see? I'm wondering, in terms of our professional development, what are some of the measures that we're putting in place to ensure that the curriculum is being executed as intended? So, often when we have, high quality instructional materials, we see that the delivery of that can be diluted when people have low expectations of what students can do. And I don't think that, we have low expectations necessarily of our students, but it can happen in classrooms. And so I just want to know, what are some of the evaluation protocols you're using to ensure that high quality instructional materials are being implemented as they have been intended, and with fidelity. So then that brings me back, and another question to the curriculum. For example, is the tutoring support that we're providing in Tier 2, is that the best tutoring support that matches the type of instruction they're receiving in illustrative math, right? Because those are really focusing on those mathematical shifts, students talking about their experiences, and I just want to know sort of the alignment there, if you feel that those are really aligned. I noticed that some schools have the intervention block. I want to know sort of, how can we, now we've targeted our students, we've talked about this for so long. We know who the students are. We have identified them. So in that, have we considered, ensuring that those students are receiving that intervention block or that enrichment block? We keep track of so much data, how are we, is there some sort of chart or graph that tells us, are those students that we have identified, are they receiving the intervention block that we'd like for students to utilize these resources? Because if we have these resources and they're not in the intervention block, then they could be possibly missing the mark. And then I just want to know, in terms of professional development for math, are we having teachers take the MCAP questions? Are they taking the tests themselves? I think that a lot of teachers are struggling with the new math, right? The mathematical shifts that are, very different than the way that we taught math. And I just want to know, is that a part of our professional development? Because what I'm finding across the country is that a lot of districts are having their teachers internalize the math. They have to sit with the math problems themselves and struggle and really think about metacognitively, okay, how would I teach this to my students? And so that's a question that I have, but I will have a motion, colleagues, when I come back.
I do want to, because it's come up 2 or 3 times in reference to the communication of this news, we do have a press release that's queued up. We wanted to share that information here. You all are on the distribution list that will go out this evening.
Okay, thank you. The chair recognizes Dr. Harris. Mike.
There it is. Is that better? There we go. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'll be short, hopefully under 5 minutes here. So my initial question was going to be, now that we've drilled down into this data, what are some of the vehicles that we're using in order to help fill those gaps? And then we got the presentation on intervention. So now a new question to that would be, how are we then aligning the services with the individual gaps, right? So when it comes to, and my colleagues have mentioned this a bit, but when it comes to educating our parents specifically on their babies, right? Like it's great to see the big picture of what's happening across the district, but when it comes to my child, how they're performing and their independent gaps, how can I then take my knowledge as a parent and knowing them to align them with one of these interventions to help their unique gap that's been identified? And so this list is actually great, and the fact that it only encompasses the interventions that we discussed tonight and that there's more out there is great to know. Is this list in Spanish also? Okay. I'd like to request that also. So that'd be great if we can also have the list in multiple languages. I know the poster under my desk, I won't pull it out, but that poster also has links to interventions and enrichments and tutoring as well. The poster? Yeah, the poster is translated, yes. Yeah. No, I'm referencing this list. This is it. Okay. We talked about parents. For my knowledge, in terms of actually utilizing these interventions, who's in charge, or do we have someone that's in charge of ensuring that our schools are actually utilizing the resources, right? And then when it comes to, and we've had this conversation a lot, where Dr. White has told us about number of licenses and things like that she has for these programs or these interventions. And we've talked about some of the average use rates for them. I'd like to know, at the schools where they're actually using the interventions, are we seeing those improvements, right? Are we seeing them, or do we need to pivot to something else? I think that data is important as well. And I'd love to get to a point, Superintendent House, and for your administration to come back to this board and say, hey, listen, we need more licenses because the use of these tools has just been outstanding. And our students and our parents and our communities love it so much that we need to expand the capability to be able to use them even more. But again, great job, team. I appreciate your time here. That sums up my comments and questions.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Board Member Briggs.
Oh, great. Okay. So first, congratulations and apologies for my lateness. I didn't see that this was an actual in-person meeting. It was I thought it was a virtual. So thank you all so much for being patient with me getting here a little bit later. I want to start with the formative, the interim, and the summative assessments that were mentioned, because I had a question about, I know that when you break apart standards and when you're planning for the year, when you are working in teams as teachers, you are teaching to those specific standards. I know also sometimes that school districts will utilize growth assessments like NWEA or others to ensure that those standards that they'll see when they take the state tests are aligned. So I was just curious if the state testing is aligned with the state testing assessment, which I'm sure it is, but just wanted to see a nod, and I see a nod there that it is. And then was curious about which growth assessment resources we use. So what specifically are the ones? I'm assuming they're NWEA, maybe a few others. So I'll throw those questions out there. I was also curious about cultural competency. So I know that it's really important that the questions that students are asked are aligned with their backgrounds and the experiences that they have. If you're talking about a baguette in one of the questions and no one knows what that is, that in itself is a barrier for a student to even get through the question for a math or a science problem. So I was just curious about the cultural competency and responsiveness of the assessments. And then this is something that came up actually from my district. And so this was around school leaders and best practices that are happening at school. So I know within District 2, there are some schools that are rock stars. Like, they're just doing amazing things. And of course, demographics is important. You have some schools that have a different demographic, but I think also you do have some schools who have similar demographics. So I was curious about if school leaders are actually learning from one another. If there's something happening at this one school, are they going to those other schools and seeing how they're implementing instruction, or what are some of the good things that are happening at that school, and is that communication happening? I had a question about homework and tutoring and accessibility. So as students are going home, and even as they're doing tutoring, are there resources, and is it taken into consideration the barriers that some families may face in access? I know that we still have a digital divide issue, even though we are kind of moving from the pandemic. And so that still is an issue for some families. And so being able to print or to access the internet is an issue. So I was just curious if there are alternatives happening at schools to address some of those things. And then the other piece, this is around the math, the middle school math. So there was talk about small group interventions, and I'm thinking this is more for human resources, but would just love to hear from the academic team. So are these small groups led by teachers? And just for kind of a visualization, I know that some people have the idea of what a small group intervention is, but that could be a teacher teaching in front of the classroom. And then after they do their full group instruction, they go and they break students into small groups. So they're going into the back, they may be teaching the same lesson, but it's more skills-based, right? So it's around the specific challenges that a student's facing. A lot of times that's a really hard thing to do in schools, particularly those that are challenged. And so I'm just curious if the teachers are doing that, are they doing that with fidelity? Are there teacher aides that are doing that? Do we need additional resources to support for small groups or having other programs that are coming in? So would love to just know more about any of the questions that can be answered to any of those pieces. And then the last thing I'm gonna say is around our multilingual learners. So I think, and this board member, Adams, I don't know, I'm blanking on your name right now, so I'm just gonna say Stafford. But I know that she mentioned that we know the student groups that are being targeted by this data and that are struggling. And I know for sure in District 2, these are students who are coming from multilingual homes. So these are, you know, and for a number of different reasons, and of course we have low-income students, et cetera, et cetera. But I was just curious if the instructional interventions, including the differentiated instruction, is that being implemented with fidelity, and is that, and what I mean by that is, like, again, just giving kind of a visualization for those who aren't in a, you know, a modern classroom. If you have like 25 kids and you have 20 of those kids who have multilingual needs, and you're teaching, you know, a whole class around a specific subject, that can be very challenging. So I'm just curious if, even with the small group interventions happening, are they happening with fidelity? Do schools need additional support there to really kind of have those wraparound supports? Because when we look at, you know, comparison of different counties and those that are outperforming us, I think, and I think the former superintendent, state superintendent Chowdhury, mentioned that there are some demographics that are doing well in certain counties that have the same challenges that we have here. And so I just want to see if there's anything we can narrow in on to really close those gaps and be more effective.
Thank you. The chair recognizes David Murray, board member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. I just wanted to kind of pose something to think about for the team. We talked about this a few weeks back in committee, specifically with math, but just in some research I was doing tonight as I looked through, this is really helpful to see what kinds of interventions we're using across the district. I'm concerned about the results of some of these programs, not here, but like the rigorous research that's been done on places like the What Works Clearinghouse. To name a few, like Dreambox, Read 180, iReady, all of those have been shown to have very, very small effect sizes. And so, you know, one, they're not free, right? We're spending a lot of money on them. Two, anytime that students are spending on these programs, they're not spending on direct instruction with their teachers. The effect sizes on direct instruction are a lot higher. So it's just something I'd, you know, like the team to think more about as we're using these programs. And then lastly, just coming out of the pandemic, you know, students are already spending so much time on screens. And so anytime they're spending on these programs that they're not spending directly with teachers is a concern of mine. And then just lastly, as we think about kind of lumping these under the category of intervention, when I'm thinking about intervention, I'm thinking of, you know, teachers or interventionists, educators working in small groups with children as opposed to online programs. So those were just a couple pushes that I wanted to make for the team. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes board member Brandon Jackson.
Hey, how y'all doing tonight? I just wanted to kind of piggyback on some things that my colleagues had mentioned. And I wanted to know, Ms. Howe specifically, what can we do, not just as a school board, but as a community as a whole, to partner on the advocacy for changing the inequitable scoring, because I think it has a bigger impact than what we really think as a community, because, you know, I think it hurts our direct and foreign investment, because like when companies look to move to different areas, there's a few variables that they consider, one being transportation, crime, and one of the bigger variables is education. But if our schools are steady being scored in a way that doesn't reflect the actual strength of the school, then it serves as a deterrent to the business community, from people investing into Prince George's County. And everybody knows in Prince George's County, I guess the Achilles for quite some time has been to bolster our local economy. So I think that this is a real concern and should be a priority, not only for the school board, but the business community, the council, the delegation, on how we can make sure that we can tell the real story of Prince George's County, so we don't miss out on that investment, foreign and direct, from opportunities.
And I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things that we vow to do as a staff and a school district is to ensure that we're working collaboratively with the state. I think they have to understand, and I think they are starting to understand that the story is a little bit different from school district to school district. The data and comparison data points and student subgroups look different as well. So we're going to continue our conversations. I think this may be something that we look at legislatively as well as we dive into these conversations over the course of the next couple months. But we will continue to tell our story, to push and collaborate, because one thing that will not change is what our data subsets are looking like in terms of the type of students that are coming into Maryland. They may not be coming as fast into other school districts in terms of our Latinx population, our African American population, but we're seeing shifts across the state as a whole. So we will work collaboratively with the next state superintendent. We want to get in early. I actually put together a document most recently around what we would like to see and provided it to PZAM in terms of our next state superintendent, and I highlighted collaboration because that's going to be an important piece in terms of listening and figuring out exactly where we go with these pieces of data.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess we'll just be on standby and, just ready whenever you guys give us our marching orders to help out. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, we're going into our second round. The chair recognizes Vice Chair Walker.
Okay. We are on round 2. Super excited. Let me leverage all of my time. Thank you. Celebrating our growth. Superintendent House says celebrating growth, and I've added to it for our wonderful video that's going to come out, is PGCPS celebrating our growth. I really can see us owning and our story and our narrative on this, exactly as the other colleagues have around the table are, but this is exciting news, and we are indeed the best school district to educate and grow our Black and brown children. And that right there is why we need to make sure this video is loud and proud, and we had some amazing presenters here tonight that can tell our story. We have students who, you know what I mean. Let me keep on going. Thank you. I'm excited for that. So let me know when you're ready. I'm ready too. I'll be in it. Owning and communicating our story, I wanted to know, when we send home our MCAP report cards, which are coming out soon, what would it take for us to attach the link for these here? I know it's not going to take much. So if we can, I don't know how we get this out to parents, but if we can somehow attach that at the same time frame that we send out the MCAP, I think it'll be really, really helpful in order to help with reinforcing what our scholars can do. You get this news sometimes and it doesn't look too great in comparison of how your scholar's doing, and you're sitting at home like, what can I do more? Okay, if we can attach that, that would be amazing. And then we can help with also communicating that message on our own platforms as well. I also have here, do we know about our usage rates for each of our interventions? Good, we do. And so as you take a look at that, I'm just wondering, are some so low over the course of time that we might want to investigate if this is the right tool? Do we communicate more, or is it not being effective? And so just really looking at our usage rate in comparison to effectiveness might help us to lessen costs or go in a different direction. Super helpful. I wanted to also Okay. This data is amazing, but as we take a look at proficiency in some of these charts, they are relatively low in comparison to where we would ideally like to see this amazing county. And so I'm just wondering, are they concentrated in particular districts? If so, then how can we leverage or flow resources to those particular schools to get them additional help that they may need? Does that make sense for the question? Okay. Because now that we have this data, we can start looking at districts and then start looking at schools, and it looks like we have that. How are we flowing them so that now we can help those students to achieve bigger, better, bolder? Yeah, I just have a big circle. What are we doing here? Oh, I only have 10 seconds. Okay, well, guess what, you guys? I think I'm done, almost. Oh, writing camps, contests, writing author clubs, like also doing things that are inspiring and motivating to get them writing, right? I love it. I'll be a part of it. We can pilot it in District 9. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Board Member Adam Stafford, second round.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Walker, I think the board should have its own oratorical contest and essay writing contest.
Yes, Shayla. Okay, we'll do that together. Oh, I'm so.
Oh, can I get back my 10 seconds? Because that was a collaborative idea. All right. 3 questions. I know I have asked about an update on the tutoring core. I know we did not, Mr. House and I, we talked about this. We didn't go for that MSDE grant for the tutoring core because we're going to do something in-house. And I was just wondering if you could just share with my colleagues and, possibly a memo or something, just so how that's going. And colleagues, that is where we have an opportunity to leverage our relationships with our institutions of higher education here in the county to come in and do that Algebra 1 tutoring with our students. And so in seeing how that can be folded into our intervention plan, I'd like to know, how many students are enrolled in the Carnegie programs. I know with Book Nook, board members did a lot of promoting of that because we had an idea of how many seats were needed to be filled. We can be big advocates for promoting that. So if we could get some kind of dashboard or chart that says, okay, Carnegie Tutoring has, 500 seats and we're seeing like 200 students regularly. We can get that out to our districts and get that information out to our channels. That's what we do. I would also say I'm really curious about our professional development on curriculum. To my colleague David Murray's point, interventions, this is not our primary mode of instruction, right? This is to support. And so the best thing that we can have is a teacher that really is knowledgeable of their content. And so I know that professional development in the past, a lot of professional development has happened after school time. And so I'm wondering how we are moving more towards peer-led, content-based math professional development during the school day. And I'd really like to understand our plan for that. And then, I think that we are seeing a lot of these gains because of some of the work that our school district is doing with out-of-school time supports. Our summer programs, we've beefed those up over the last few years. I think that definitely has something to do with this. The work that we're doing and partnering with other agencies across the county, I think that is part of this. So I do want to acknowledge that. And I do have a motion, thanks to my colleague, Dr. Miller. So I'd like to bring forward.
The chair
Dr. Zipporah Miller.
The chair recognizes
Okay.
Adam Stafford for a motion.
I move for our policy committee to develop a letter for the board to vote on to require MSDE to disaggregate data by race, ELL, farms, by county to demonstrate the unique gains within majority minority districts.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Okay.
We can't do a motion in a work session?
Right, that's what
Okay,
they're
I'll
telling
just bring
me.
it to
So
the
that's
policy
what we're-
committee.
It's a good idea.
Okay.
So the 26th.
We'll bring it to the policy committee. Just move it somewhere else. Thank you.
So the motion fails for lack of a second, and we can't do motions at a work session. So anyway, I just want to say that for the record. The chair recognizes Dr. Juanita Miller, second round.
I just wanted to make a comment. It seems to be a thread among all the questions or concerns that have been expressed by board members about the data and it being compared with the state. Is there any way we can compare that data
Uh,
I'm thinking about the demographics also.
and that's a good
Look at
question.
a certain, high school in South County versus high school in Central or, I have to repeat myself. Do a comparison demographically by schools.
So the answer is, within district, yes, we can. To look at schools outside of the district or to compare, okay, yes.
No,
So
I
we can
want to
within.
make sure inside.
Yes.
And I ask that because it would also reveal some other data in terms of where the strength of certain schools in terms of the meeting the proficiency goals. Does that make sense to you?
It does, and we're going to be sharing several platforms with you that will allow you to do that as well, of which will allow multiple drop-downs, school fields being one of them, so you can conduct those comparisons, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Strader.
Thank you. Second round for Board Member Briggs.
Thank you so much, Chair Mickens-Murray. So I just had two really quick questions to build on. So I wanted to know about career and technical education and if we're connecting real-world learning opportunities to some of these interventions. Because I continue to hear from members of my community that actually this came up a lot. I'm going to have my town hall last month that they would like to see more of a connection, and I think this is in the education world, period, more of a connection to students feeling like they understand why they're doing the algebra, right? They're not just doing it to do it. They understand why they do the geometry. And I think that career and technical education could be a pathway to being able to make those real-world connections or just other opportunities that are existing. I think we have it in our climate action plan that there's supposed to be something around the science and some of those pieces being embedded into the curriculum and instruction that is happening in the classroom. So that might be an opportunity to think about that. And then the other thing I was going to say was, are there any insights coming out of the summer slide? So just for clarification for those that are watching, students have all this progress they make in the school year, and then when they come back because they've been on vacation and maybe they didn't read or didn't do any math, they come back and they've kind of lost some of that. And so I'm just curious if any of this data is being compared with MCAP to the summer slide data. So like when we look at like the MCAP results, a student who left in the spring, are they coming back when we look at their results for their first testing cycle? Is it behind where they were? I mean, obviously that's a summer slide, but just curious if when we're thinking about this in a data-driven way, is that being kind of compared, and then is it regressive, or what are the insights there? So those are additional pieces I wanted to mention.
Thank you so much. Seeing no other lights, Superintendent House, I have one suggestion. Board Member Struthers, Boozer Struthers, suggested that you align your priorities with the blueprint. The reason that is so important is because one of our priorities should be funding the blueprint fully. You will need additional resources. Just from this presentation, that is obvious. Please align it with the blueprint.
Absolutely, and that's definitely something that we're keeping in mind as we're diving into budget season.
Thank you. This was an excellent presentation, and all my years, counting the ones back in 2000, this is the best presentation on academics that I've been a part of, a privilege to see. So thank you so much. Follow-ups. Follow-up items from this meeting will be posted upon receipt. I would also like to inform the public of the board's upcoming meetings. They are as follows. The Academic Achievement Committee will have their meeting on Monday, October 16th at 5:30 p.m. On Tuesday, October 17th, the Policy and Governance Committee will meet at 5 p.m. The Operations, Budget, and Fiscal Affairs Committee will be held on Wednesday, October 18th at 5 p.m. The Boundary Public Hearings will be Thursday, October 19th, and Tuesday, October 24th, via Zoom. The next board meeting will be in person here at Sasser on October 26, 2023 at 7 p.m. Please continue to check the board webpage for updates and more information about upcoming board meetings. Colleagues, is there a motion to adjourn the October 12th board work session?
Second.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The motion carries with 9 votes. At this time, the work session is adjourned. Colleagues, we will now hear the closing statement to convene in the special executive session.
Madam Chair, I move that upon a motion that has been properly recorded and adopted, the Board of Education of Prince George's County meet in closed session pursuant to Section 3-305, General Provisions Article Annotated Code of Maryland to address the following. To discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, or any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals. To protect the privacy or reputation of individuals concerning a matter not related to public business. To consult with counsel to obtain legal advice on a legal matter. To consult with staff, consultants, or other individuals about pending or potential litigation.
It has been moved and seconded. All those, any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. With 11 votes, the motion carries. Colleagues, can we proceed to the executive session? Thank you, everybody.